Now, to give us more background on the Steinhoff Saga and how it all started, how we find ourselves where we are today, I am joined by James Styan. He's the author of the book Steinhoff, Inside South Africa's Biggest Corporate Crash. Thank you very much, Mr. Styan, for your time here on eNCA. Now, of course, we're hearing that there are visa issues and he's still in South Africa, in fact, and not in Germany, so he cannot appear in court. But just tell me your thoughts about our failure in South Africa, the state's failure in South Africa to have him face criminal charges here. Is it because the company was started in Germany?
Well, the company was, no, I don't think that's the reason. The company was headquartered in Stellenbosch and certainly did most of its work from here, although it did change its registration to the Netherlands in about 2015 or thereabouts. But it was certainly headquartered in Stellenbosch, and I think that it's now 5.5 years later, and we still haven't had any charges laid by the NPA against Mr. Jooste for probably the biggest fraud in South African history. So it's a question to be asked to the head of the NPA, to the South African Police Service. You know, from the beginning, I had my doubts that we'd ever see any action taken. I think that the lack of capacity. I think that the police's commercial crimes unit, which is the specialized unit, which is the unit meant to investigate incidents like these, fraud, you know, international fraud, very complex. You need specialists, and I don't think we have those specialists in the civil service any longer. Certainly not in the police. The last time I checked, the Hawks or the police's commercial crimes unit don't even have a CA in service. So, you know, the complete lack of capacity to tackle this kind of intricate case simply means there's no action. So it's another blight on our justice system.
Just remind us again, Mr. Styan, how we find ourselves where we are today. 5 years later, no accountability.
Well, as I indicated, I think the lack of capacity in the state to investigate massively complex matter like Steinhoff. But I must remind you and your viewers, it's not the only, Steinhoff is by no means the only you know, corporate fraud or scandal in South Africa. Even you've got Tongaat, you've got Hewlett, you've got SAA, multiple state-owned entities that are similar concerns about massively fraudulent activities. Eskom, there's a case in point. And, you know, there's hardly any arrests that you see. There's hardly any action being taken, barring one or two small exceptions. So I really think there's a complete lack of capacity, understanding, and skills, and possibly a political will to prosecute and investigate these sort of cases. And just to remind you and your viewers again, you know, we in Steinhoff's case, so these are publicly traded companies. And this was a company that was, by all accounts, doing very, very well, which is why I think so many people invested into this company, despite some very big red flags, in my view. Of course, hindsight's a perfect science. But a lot of a lot of investors invested in Steinhoff. Their profits in, I think, 5 years prior to their crash went up by something like 500%. It's a fact of public record. So their profits were increasing massively. But as we found out, those profits had been misrepresented by about 100 billion rand. But what it means by investing in these companies, those are pension funds, and the Public Investment Corporation, which manages, you know, nurses, teachers, policemen, and women. Ironically, their pension fund lost about 21 billion rand in the Steinhoff crash. So your moms and dads and uncles and aunts and grandparents and my family and others as well, they've all been impacted to some extent. And that's why this is in the public interest. But, you know, you find that instances like the PIC had their own challenges as well. And I don't even think we got to the bottom of that. So it's unfortunately a multi-layered challenge and highly complex. And it doesn't look to be that there's a real political will to sort it out.
There's obviously also George Evans, another co-accused of Marcus Jooste there, who has also said that he did nothing wrong, etc. Would you suggest that South African government, even though it will look more reactionary, that after things have concluded in the criminal case in Germany, that we start moving here? Maybe that will be able to give them the kick that they need to start things moving here, because there are people in South Africa who lost millions and billions of rand.
No. Look, to be honest, I don't think our state has the capacity and ability at the moment. They will go to court and get handed a hiding. Remember, these are guys with most of their billions still intact. So they will hire the very best lawyers and the very best experts who will be running rings around what the state has to offer. So if you really want to take them on, you have to get your ducks in a row. You have to put real budget there. You have to have real, you want to really make a change, but it's not only for Steinhoff, as mentioned. It's for a multitude of other instances and other companies, including in the state. It takes real political will. It takes budget. It takes expertise. Otherwise, you're just going to look more. You're going to be even more embarrassed. Another case, another area that needs real questioning is the Independent Regulatory Board of Auditors. You got these institutions that look after, or this one in particular looks after the auditors. And just for interest's sake, you got your 4 big audited companies, whose names I won't mention right now, but they audit about 94% of all the listed JSE companies. And every one of these big audit firms have been implicated in a massive, or been mentioned, or been involved to some extent in a massive fraud in South Africa. I mean, in Steinhoff's case, it was Deloitte. In SAA's case, it was PwC, and in Conky. What happens to these companies? Is IRBA, the Independent Regulatory Board for Auditors, are they capacitated adequately to take on these massively powerful auditing companies who are supposed to be the watchdogs and the watchkeepers and are failing miserably time and time again? I mean, Steinhoff got clean audits year in and year out. And that is another reason why investors would keep investing in a company, because you get a clean sheet from the auditors that we are supposed to be trusting. You look at Steinhoff's board as another matter of interest. They had 3 CAs on board with doctorates. You got to ask questions about our qualifications and these people that are getting qualifications and their ability to adequately understand the businesses that they're involved in, because we are relying on them to keep our money safe. And frankly, this is not happening.
And I mean, I'm looking at the visuals that the team is currently showing on air, and I remember, I think it was about 2017 or 18 when Marcus Jooste was called to account before Parliament, in front of Scopa, and he addressed Parliament. He explained his alleged innocence, etc., and that was it from our government in terms of oversight, etc. And then he was left to still live in his mansion on his wine farm in Steinhoff, or rather in Stellenbosch, and everything just went quiet about him. So I guess what you're saying is that because our government has no power to be able to take this man on, that the victims in South Africa should just hope that he is jailed in Germany and just take that?
Well, I think our government has power. They just don't have the political will. I think if you go back to that parliamentary hearing, we've never had another one. Why haven't they called him in again? We have more parliamentary hearings into Thabo Beste's escape than into Marcus Jooste. I mean, it's ridiculous. So I was at that meeting, and the level of questioning by our MPs, barring 1 or 2 opposition MPs, was frankly ridiculous. Not once was Marcus Jooste challenged enough that he had to say, you can't answer this question, his lawyers will have to take the question. I mean, that's an example of how weak and how poor the questioning was, and it was limited to 1 day. And frankly, it's just very sad, and that's why I say we must ask the questions about political will. You look at Mr. Bester, and you look at the sudden interest in private prisons. People forget about Bosasa and the fact that some of those people in Parliament themselves were implicated. Some people in our national cabinet was implicated in state-run prison corruption. So, suddenly that's handily forgotten, and we all run after the next, with respect. But our parliamentarians, frankly, are not up to it either, to a large extent.
And I mean, you're absolutely right. I have to agree with you, because it was Chief Justice Raymond Zondo in his report that he gave to the president last year, that state capture report. In one of them, he does say that Parliament doesn't actually adequately practice its oversight role. Thank you so much for speaking to us here on eNCA. That was James Styan. He's the author of the book Steinhoff, Inside South Africa's Biggest Corporate Crash.